Okay, welcome back. This is week 1. But before we start week 1, did you do what we asked you to do? Did you go to week 0 and look at all those videos? Yeah, that's kind of important. It basically explains how the whole course is laid out, what your expectations are, and all the rest of that stuff. So if you haven't done that, just stop this video now. Go to week 0, watch all those videos, and then come back. Trust me, it'll be a mo better situation. So the way it works is I follow along in the book. So it makes sense for you to have the book at the same time because I'm going to be calling out page numbers. Now this first lecture really isn't very much hands-on. So quite frankly, you could be practically anywhere and just watch the video and pay attention. But typically you need the video, you'd need the book, and you need access to a computer to do things. I fully expect you to, pause the video and go try something that I do on the screen and go, oh, okay, and then pick up from the video and go from there. Okay, all makes sense? Well, in that case, let's begin. At the beginning, we start with a set of learning objectives. Let's just go through this to make sure that we're actually going to cover everything we're supposed to cover. So, when you're done, you should be able to describe the evolution of the internet, explain the needs for web standards. We're going to talk about universal design a great deal, benefits of an accessible design, reliable sources of information, ethical use, the purpose of the web browsers and web servers, networking protocols, URIs and URLs, HTML and XHTML and HTML5, and whatever the popular trends are in the use of the web. Okay, so we're now actually ready to start. So, on page 2, they start talking about the internet and the web. And a lot of people get this kind of confused, but the internet is the big thing, and the web is a small part of that. So, the web is a subset of the internet. The internet is the big guy. For example, if I'm using Microsoft Outlook, I am using the internet, but I'm not using the web. Okay, cool. All right. So they have a definition. It's kind of goofy, but hey. It talks about the internet as a collection of devices all using the same networking protocols. Okay. Basically what that means is that to get on the internet, all you basically have to do to play is have a machine that has the right kind of protocols, and all the machines now all are capable of connecting to the network and connecting to the internet. They talk about the early days of the internet, the birth of the internet. Some of the history is just kind of boring, so I'm going to skip that, but I'm going to get to some of the cool part. It was done in the 60s with the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and it was done during the Cold War. And so their idea was we need a robust communication system. So if our communication from the East Coast goes to the West Coast, and let's say it goes through Chicago or something, and Chicago got blown up by an atomic bomb, then the messages would be just automatically routed around wherever that was. I know that's kind of a spooky way of thinking about the birth of the internet, but yeah, that's what they were thinking. They were thinking Cold War nuclear stuff. So the internet basically is a very resilient network. It can handle having a node or an entire city gone and still be able to communicate. Later on, the National Science Foundation got involved. They started funding all the universities to get on the internet. And that's how it kind of got started. There's this little cool thing here talking about the growth of the internet. And they have these cool little charts here. If you just pull up one, for example, the world. Whoop. Huh, that's weird. Here we go. World Internet Statistics. About who's using the internet and what's the growth. And obviously, there's an awful lot of stuff in here. Kind of cool stuff. The idea is that the internet is exploding. We kind of got the internet first, and so our use of the internet is actually kind of sort of on the decline, only because we got there first. And so a lot of the other developing nations, like India, where it hasn't got there, the growth is tremendous. So how many users are out there? Well, Asia accounts for half of the internet stuff going on out there. So think about this. Let's say you're writing a web page and you're thinking to yourself, oh, well, I'll just do mine in English because, I don't care about those other languages. Oh, yeah? Look at this chart one more time. How many of those people are speaking English? Okay, cool. In 1991, they actually opened up the internet for commercial use. Up to that time, it was all just being paid for by taxpayers' dollars. So it would be somewhat inappropriate for you to go out there and start making money off the internet. And so they finally opened it up in 1991, and that's when the dot-coms started exploding. It'd be a good question on, why was it ever restricted to begin with? I mean, kind of weird idea, right? But, eventually the Cold War was over and they went, what the heck, this is a pretty cool thing that everyone else can use. This is an economic engine that's going to drive the nation. Let's go ahead and open it up. The birth of the web. So Tim Berners-Lee worked for CERN, which is basically the European version of our Nuclear Regulatory Commission. Okay. Just a researcher there. And he was tired of having to call people on the phone or get copies, paper copies of research papers. And so he said, why don't we just put all this stuff on the computer, and that way everyone could access anybody else's research without having to pester anybody. So his idea, the birth of the web, was for scholarly journals, not cat videos, but scholarly journals. That's what his thinking was. So he created two parts of this. The first part is the hypertext transfer protocol. That's the actual protocol put in place that says if you want to be a web server, you have to have this. If you want to be a browser, you have to have this. It's the mechanics of it. And these protocols are not complex. I mean, the HTTP protocol only has a dozen commands to it. So it's pretty easy. The next one he did was the hypertext markup language, HTML. So he basically took a kind of a prototype that already existed and built a markup language. So markup language, that's a strange term, right? So what do we mean by markup language? Well, what we mean is I want to put something in bold. So I have text and I want to put something in bold. Maybe I want to put something in colors. Maybe I want to put something in italics. That's marking up. Basically, we're talking word processing, right? We're talking about taking a paragraph and, maybe doing an indent and, making this word bold and this word italics and, that kind of stuff. That's what a markup language does. It allows you to decorate the text just like you were using a word processor. Okay. So even back then, this was all just scholarly journals, so there really wasn't any graphics, involved. There no pictures, no sounds, no videos. It was just text. Okay. So in the first graphical browser, it was called Mosaic. It was produced at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. They have a National Center for Superconducting Computer Applications. And so they wrote basically a graphical browser. It was the very first one. They gave it away to everyone. They didn't try to make money out of it. And so all the people who were running Unix at the time could fire up a Mosaic browser and get all these web pages. Kind of cool. So there's a little diagram here that talks about kind of like the perfect storm, the convergence of all these technologies that happen to make the web what it is today. So starting with, yes, we allowed the commercial use of the internet, and then the World Wide Web was created, and then machines got very, very inexpensive, and then we started getting graphical, and then we had graphical browser, and then we had easy ways to get onto the internet like dial-up and stuff, and then finally they got to the point where widespread use of the internet is practically, a requirement. I mean, for example, if you're building a new subdivision someplace out in the middle of nowhere, and you don't have internet service to that community, you're not going to sell homes. I mean, this is a critical thing. It's not like a commodity type item. Well, I'll take some or not. No, this is a requirement. It's no different than having cell phone service or landline service or anything else. It's a requirement. So there's an interesting conversation here in the textbook talking about who runs the internet. And this is unfortunately a very complex thing, and it's kind of silly. a lot of people get it wrong, okay? And by a lot of people, let's talk politicians and the press, okay? They don't understand, and they typically get it wrong. For example, there were some, one of our very own senators was trying to pass a law that would prevent the United States from giving up control of the internet. Like, control? What the heck is he talking about? Well, the way it worked is, well, table that for just a second. I promise I'll get back to that. So, the way the internet is really run is there's a standards committee. And the standards committee goes by these little funky names like the Internet Engineering Task Force and the Internet Architecture Board. And the way they work is they work by doing like requests for comments. They'll send out a document and ask people to comment on it, and then they'll review it, and then they'll finally make a recommendation. And this is a kind of a slow process. It's not incredibly quick. So, for example, how do I get my web address? Let's say that I'm going to produce a web page, and I want to be able to let everybody know that here's my fancy web page, www.kumquat.com. How do I get that name? Well, you have to go to the naming convention. The Internet Corporation of Assigned Numbers and Names, ICANN. Now, this is a non-profit organization in the U.S. They used to have a contract with the Department of Commerce that made them kind of tied to the government. So they were like, yes, they're a private organization that had always been a private organization, non-profit, but they had a contract with the U.S. That is what they were talking about on the control of the internet, is that if I want a name, who do I go ask for it? And so right now, okay, 3 months ago, I would go to ICANN and say, I want to register a web address. Today, now that they no longer have a contract with the U.S. government, I go to ICANN and register my web address. I'm sorry, I didn't see a difference there, did you? I mean, this is kind of crazy, huh? So, yeah, there's an awful lot of people who just have an emotional attachment to the control of the internet, but they don't really know what that means. So, back to reality. ICANN is the one who hands out the IP addresses and domain names. So if you want to register a domain name, that's where you go. Here's a strange scenario. Let's say you're Joe's Plumbing in downtown Killeen, Texas. Could there be a Joe's Plumbing in Dallas? Yeah, probably. No one would get confused with that. Could there be a Joe's Plumbing in Albuquerque? Sure. How about Tokyo? Sure. But how many www.joesplumbing.com are there? One. One and only one in the entire world. So we kind of sort of need a central area that hands out these names. We can't have multiple people handing out names because that wouldn't work, right? Okay, cool. All right. There's a brief discussion about the difference between an intranet and an extranet. We'll go through it. So basically, an intranet is basically a private network. It uses the exact same protocols as the internet. It's just that it's private. Okay, no big deal. An extranet is, okay, I have a private network, but I'm going to let my partners in. So it's kind of semi-private. I mean, it's private for me and private for a select few companies, but that's it. That's the only distinction. So internet, intranet, and extranet, the three network types. Okay, we're coming up on the 15-minute mark, so we're going to pause this and we'll pick this thing up again in just a few.